an 11th album from an indie folk cult hero, a 7th album from a revered female rock star, a 5th album from a less than prolific genreless band, a 3rd album by a British rock rap duo, and a debut album from a bedroom pop artist, all in one podcast. This is 5 to 9's Album of the Month episode for April 2024. I'm Andrew Belt, editor of the 5 to 9 blog, and joining me as always is Karl Blakesley of New Music Central and Kiley Larsen, the founder of Santa Fe-based record label Mama Mañana Records. So how are you both doing?
Fantastic, you?
Yeah,
not
good
too
today.
bad. Loving the weather here. We finally have the sun. So
Yeah, it's just setting on the horizon, so I may affect the lighting, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
a tear rolls down the eye. The start of better weather in this country. Momentous. Before we dive into the 5 records, we will recap our 3 music highlights from the month outside of those we're about to discuss. So we had Kiley first last month. So Karl, how was your April and what were your 3 highlights, would you say?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that April's probably been my favourite month of the year, I'd say so far music-wise. Really struggled to narrow this down to just 3 this month, but I landed on 1 gig, 2 albums. So I'll start quickly with the gig. So not too many this month, but definitely the highlight was Everything at Rock City here in Nottingham. So yeah, I know you both weren't completely convinced last month by Mountain Head, but yeah, by far my most played album of this month, and then probably my most played of the year, I think, up until this point as well. And it was, classic case of like the album release and tour happening within a few weeks of each other, which kind of, for me, that always adds that extra like element. It's kind of like arriving at the peak of your fandom, rather than having to wait months for the tour to come around and stuff like that. So yeah, it was like came at the right moment at the start of April, and yeah, their live show's just as good as any right now, I'd say. The catalogue's only getting more and more impressive with each new release. So many great songs now that they can pull from. Ended up playing, 20 songs, I think, mostly from Mountain Head, but a few classics in there too. Great moment right at the end of the set, hearing the Knots crowd loudly belting out, feeling like a fat child in a pushchair refrain from No Reptiles. That was, not your typical sing-along anthem, but yeah, that song, No Reptiles, it just, it gets the crowd going. So that was fantastic. And yeah, the staging was like the best I've seen from them. They had like a physical mountain that they brought with them on stage. It wasn't just like a fabric backdrop. It was like this 3D set that kind of sat around the drums, looked a bit like a rock climbing wall at the back of the stage. And yeah, it just really helped you bring you into that like Mountain Head world. Had other like props throughout as well. They did this cool thing for Enter the Mirror, where they brought a mirror, fully enough, out onto the middle of the stage, and they were like bouncing like the spotlights off it during the course of the song. That was really cool. And yeah, just like amazing neon lighting all the way through. So just everything about it, great night. And yeah, hopefully not too long before I see him again. So yeah, that was the gig highlight for the month. And then the 2 albums, again, struggled to narrow this down, but I landed on the first one being Yummy by James, 18th studio album from those Manchester legends. So one of my favourite bands of all time. They were actually a shortlist for the pod this month, but I think I remember saying to you guys, like, I wasn't too convinced by the singles. So I think the album that I did pick, the singles were better. And to be honest, I think overall it was the right pick as well. But I think if we had gone for this, it would have held its own in this batch as well. Just incredible that after 40 years, they're still, pushing their sound forward, where a lot of their peers have kind of stagnated. Coughley and Gallagher cough. Tim Booth, still has, interesting stories, interesting thoughts to share. Very much an album that's in touch with the modern world, both politically and socially as well. And yeah, just really fantastic batch of songs. Life's a Fucking Miracle, which was one of the singles, but I don't think it was one of the ones I heard pre-album. Fantastic song. Stay, Shadow of a Giant, Butterfly. Just some of the highlights there. Not really a bad moment. And while it's, not their best album by any stretch, it's definitely a step up, I'd say, from their last outing. And definitely it stands up to other recent efforts like Girl at the End of the World, which is one of the better kind of recent ones. I'd kind of put it on that level as well. So yeah, big fan of that one. Great to see those guys delivering again. And then the last one I'll mention is In Lieu of Flowers by Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties, which is the solo project from Dan Campbell, who's the frontman for the Wonder Years. And this album comes, I think it's 10 years after his first solo records, and it's like the third part of this trilogy of sorts. And yeah, if you've been on like album of the year recently, it's like the second highest rated album of 2024 now. It's got like a 92 critic score, and honestly, it's thoroughly deserved. Just great storytelling, big melodies, heartfelt vocals, good mix of all the things I like. It's a bit emo, it's a bit indie, it's a bit folk. So yeah, it ticks a lot of boxes for me. What I'd compare it to, I'd say it's not a million miles away from the Spanish Love Songs record from last year, but maybe less synths and more like strings and like folky arrangements. But yeah, it's quickly become one of my favorites of the year. Just had it on again tonight. Yeah, just an incredible collection of songs that the more I play it, the more it kind of sinks in. And yeah, if you've not heard that one, definitely one that I can't recommend enough. So yeah, those were my three highlights for this month.
Aaron Dessner, did you say?
Aaron West, but it's Dan Campbell from the Wonder Years. That's like but yeah, that's his solo project.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, I've been on that album of the year recently. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the few albums that Aaron Dessner didn't work on this year so far.
Yeah,
that's the national guy. Yeah,
yeah.
My mistake. So Aaron West, yeah. And then when I hear West, I just think of Family Guy. Is it Family Guy? Or... I
thought you were going to say Kanye
there. No. Adam West is what I think.
Oh, of. Adam West.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. I've not seen that because going on album of the year recently, it was just all Kamasi Washington. So yeah, that it's been hidden because he seems to have taken over both songs and album lists there.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. Everything throwing the kitchen sink and everything, or the mountain for their shows. They don't do things by half. And then yeah, the middle album, James. Yeah, they're playing the O2 on my birthday, which I thought I considered. I know you're a big fan, and
get along to it. Get along to it.
That'll be a big show for them. The O2's one of the biggest ones you can do in London. So
yeah, I mean for me they need to be headlining Glastonbury before, like it's we've got Coldplay doing it again this year. It's like James 40 years. They've got an absolute mammoth catalogue of big singles. They're still one of the best live bands going. I'd get them on the Pyramid stage. So.
I have seen them, but that was the halftime show of the Rugby League Super League Grand Final. And
a solid 10 minutes.
But for how long it was, they did sit down, and that is the only time the crowd at that sports event has actually tuned in and like actually got people to sit down. Like there's been big names before, Razorlight, Feeder, whoever. None of them, it's background noise. But James actually, I suppose they're from Manchester, so maybe they had that local element. But he's a Leeds fan, the Tim Booth. So controversial. So yeah, Kylie. It was the month of your festival, locals only. So I'm, if I'm right. So I imagine that's going to feature in your top 3 from April.
Yeah, for sure. A combination of what a success it was, and also the thing that I've spent the last 4 months putting together. So it's a relief that it was successful and a relief that it's over with. Yeah, we had the locals only festival. It was April 27th, and had 8 bands, 5 DJs on 2 stages, and you know, everything was fantastic. The only thing you can't control is the weather. And when you schedule something in April in New Mexico, things can go either way. And, Gold Tides on the label, they kicked things off. And right after I introduced them, we had some snow and lightning. So, gave them a pause, but ended up working through most of the daytime bands okay. And then when we got to the 2 headliners, there was torrential downpour, and the outdoor stage did not have a shell or anything like that. I think that's being rectified now from experience. But yeah, Side Montero, one of my favorite Albuquerque bands. We had to cut them about 25 minutes into their set, cover up all the gear with tarps. And, luckily the DJs that we had on the inside stage were great guys. Shout out to Up All Night. They're awesome. And worked with us on, ending their set early, and very thankful for them for packing out the indoor stage. And so we moved all the gear inside, and Side Montero continued and played another half an hour. And then we had Red Light Cameras, the headliner, play inside an intimate set. It was really awesome to, I wish it could have been outside, but in the end, despite the weather, we had almost 400 people there, which I was really happy with, and a wait list to get in for those inside shows that night. So it was, it was a 16-hour day, but just fantastic. So, I'm thankful to all the bands who played amazing sets, and the sound guys that were enormous help, and the hotel staff that just great day of help. So yeah, it's we'll see when the next one is, but it's definitely going to come back again. And then my 2 musical highlights. I'm not sure if April was as solid for myself as it was for Karl, but we're trying to conjure the summer weather. The wind is still whipping around, but I'm in that summer mindset, and combined with my lack of wanting to listening to lyrics and pop music once the weather gets nicer. Got 2 electronic albums that I was really into, 2 of my favorites. The first being Brother Tiger, his new release in his Fundamentals series. This was Fundamentals number 5. And if you haven't listened to these, they come from, they originally started from his pandemic live streams, and he just gets in the studio and goes to town for a couple of hours and puts together these gorgeous soundscapes between synths and beats. And so I believe this was the first one from a non-pandemic stream. So it's a new era with number 5 here. And like Empire Strikes Back, it might be the best one. I'm not sure. I'm tied with number 4. 4 was really my jam. Was that last year? So just fantastic electronic soundscapes. And then another one that I've been waiting for new music from, FM Skyline, who is, I guess, overall in the vaporwave category. I like on the Bandcamp for a genre, he also has it listed as computer gaze, and I think that's a good descriptor as well. From the album art to the music, it kind of pulls from old DOS big box games, that kind of thing. So thinking like Myst, that kind of thing, and just a fantastic album that tells a story without any lyrics and just thematically fantastic. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm, phasing out the pop structures and getting into summer escapes right now.
Very nice. Bit of electronica and computer gaze certainly sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
So, and improvisations are the best laid plans, but I suppose, yeah, weather it can never be guaranteed for outdoor shows, and yeah, it's awesome that you had so many people who are wanting to get in and watch those bands. So yeah, first one ticked off, and look forward to seeing when the next festival is lined up and seeing how that goes as well. So yeah, April for me, probably more leaning towards Karl's assessment of the month. I really enjoyed it, mainly due to the albums we are about to discuss. But there were some really great moments at the beginning of the month, and that's going to be where I land with the three highlights. So 2 albums, 1 EP. The first album by a Welsh band called Buzzard Buzzard Buzzard. Yeah, I mean, never heard of them before, and this one just came into the inbox, so thought I would give it a shot. And in a nutshell, this is the album I hoped Ty Segall would have produced back in our January pod. Basically, it's so reminiscent of what he does, but tight across 10 tracks. Very kind of classic rock style psyche, and yeah, called Skinwalker, this album, which is their second album, and it's thematically a descent of the mind. So reading a little bit more into it, it kind of begins at one point, and then further and further down we go. It's supposed to show that unraveling, even with one of the songs, which was about the lead singer deciding to go away for a weekend by himself with his dog and slowly going mad. So he wrote about In My Egg was the single, which first led me to the band, and I really loved. And essentially In My Egg is wanting to have that safety and comfort of the egg, I suppose, and your home comforts, which he'd given up what he thought would be a massively creative process, but instead ended up kind of scaring himself with this solo retreat. And you got a song about therapy, which gives thoughts to what he sees in his mind. Like there's a party, but there's an atmosphere in this party, is kind of how he describes it and stuff. So basically, I felt the first half of the album was good and even a bit indie style as well. But then the second of the album is really where it hits. And so it seems I enjoyed the bits which were maybe a bit darker as well. And like I say, there's some creepy spoken word bits which I didn't particularly love those bits. They are genuinely creepy. But yeah, that very much fits with what they're trying to achieve here. And like I say, even scratching those out, you've got just 10 awesome songs. So that was certainly kicking off the month in a very strong way. My second album is Pillow Queens with Name Your Sorrow, so third album from the Irish girl group. Not listened to them before, have seen their name featured in many places, kind of a rising band who are now pretty well established by now, and as a first taste, a very enjoyable one. Again, very rocky, some country twangs to it, I suppose, a little bit Alanis Morissette, mainly songs about love and relationships and that sort of thing, which to a point drags a little thematically, but overall very solid album. And you can add to the list of good Irish albums we've had this year. New Dad we had earlier in the year on the pod, and Sprints as well. And just at the moment, Dublin and Ireland really seems to be the place where it's at. Finally, an EP. Again, someone I'd never heard of before, called Mae Krell, who's from Brooklyn. And this album, the EP is Kabuto Mushi. All the songs have both Japanese lyrics and English lyrics as well. And it's just a really tenderly written and arranged chamber folk EP over 5 songs, most of which really land, and was a great introduction to this artist who has a lot of potential and a lovely voice, which reminded me of the likes of Anna Birch or Stella Donnelly. So my kind of thing. So that was my April, but let's get into the meat of the matter. And it's Bob Vylan with Humble as the Sun, which was Karl's pick for the poll. Thanks for voting, everyone. Great choice. And I'll pass over to Karl to kick off this discussion.
Yeah, I think it was officially my pick for the poll, but I think if it hadn't gone to me, you would have had it as well, Andrew. So definitely a popular win definitely a popular win for us guys. So yeah, thanks for voting. And Bob Vylan. So yeah, like many, I imagine, discovered them off the back of their terrific second album, Bob Vylan Presents The Price of Life. Before that, there was kind of a name that, I'd seen mentioned a lot. And it's not one you're going to easily forget either.
It's fantastic. It's one of the best artist names ever. Agreed.
So, so from that, it was like, suddenly they appeared on like the Dr. Dot poster, and I thought, okay, best listen to these guys now. Went into that record, loved it, went to see them at Dr. Dot, came out loving them even more. They just an absolute force, both on both fronts, whether live or in the studio. Just great charisma, great style about them. And that album ended up in my personal top 20 for that year. But on the wider scale, it was quite a history-making record, the first entirely independent album. So self-recorded, produced, mixed, released, promoted, everything themselves, to break into the top 20 of the UK album chart, which is, quite the feat. And then in the same year as well, they became the first ever winner of the Best Alternative Act at the MOBO Awards. So something that they kind of lobbied for, and we're able to make history again as well. So, Humble as the Sun arrives with a lot to live up to. It's quite an understatement to say that that previous album did set quite a high bar. And when you have like such a breakout record like that, the expectations are always stacked high on the follow-up anyway. But I think those added elements, it was just like, they're never going to top that record. But, for me, whilst I don't think this record has had or will have the same impact that, the Price of Life had for, for them, in terms of the music on the record, for me, this is every bit as good. In fact, I think it even surpasses what came before as well. Everything here, they've just stepped up. The production is more refined. The scope of their sound has evolved. I think Bobby's lyrics are even sharper and harder hitting this time around. Not that they weren't hard hitting on the previous one, but you can tell his penmanship's come on as well since the last record. And they've kind of got that crossover grind punk sound, and I think they've added some like interesting new elements into the mix. There's a bit of electronic influence coming through with the Fatboy Slim sample that they've got on there. There's some Prodigy vibes coming in on Rain. And there's bits of reggae coming in as well. There's like, the Bob Marley references. You've got is it Tenor Saw sample on Ring the Alarm. It's just another absolute whirlwind of a listen that is just completely thrilling from start to finish, and unlike anything else I've heard this year. In terms of highlights, I think the opening track is probably the biggest departure from what has come before. The first two records are at their core punk records, and to come out on this record with this really passionate, quite so soulful, it's got the gospel vocals coming in at the end. First time I played it, I was like, it wasn't what I was expecting from them at all. And it, just major goosebumps listening to that song. And then they come straight in with Rain, which I think has quickly become one of my most played songs of the year. Phenomenal music video as well. Definitely check that out if you've not seen it. Very artistic. Love the beat change on that track and the way he changes his manner midway through. Just from this really confident to just really angry at being held back, basically. And yeah, the singles still all fantastic. Hunger Games, Dream Big, He's a Man, all of them with an important message at the core. Whether it's the cost of living crisis, toxic masculinity. It's what I will say is it's heavy subjects and important messages that he's trying to get across, but the record as well, it's never a heavy listen. If you take He's a Man, it's such a cut-in parody, mocking the ridiculousness of these right-wing wannabe alpha males that he just spends the whole track taking the piss out of them, basically. The line, what is it? G-spot don't exist, mate. It's just feminist propaganda. Gets me every time. It's it's moments like that. So, like I say, it's important subjects, but he does it in such a not an easy. At times it's aggressive, but overall, I think it's a really positive listen. And I think striking that balance between getting the message across, but then keeping it not easy listening, but as I say, a positive listen. I'm quite in awe of it, being able to strike that balance. So, yeah, for me, one of the most interesting and vital bands operating right now. And I think for me, this album just cements it. Really fantastic record.
Yeah, I'll chip in. I mean, like you, the entry point for me with this band was Price of Life, and ended up in my top 10 of a much smaller list back then, even 2 years ago, 2022. And yeah, just refreshing to kind of get that, I don't know, it's kind of that old new metal kind of sound. I got a lot from that last album, really, that kind of rap rock vibes. And yeah, I very much put them in the category with Idols, actually, in terms of those cutting. I think you mentioned He's a Man on this album, where they're kind of sending up these toxic masculine characters, and Idols, have a lot of form on that front. Although interestingly, it's and I loved Idols' move this year. I know it was iffy across the three of us, but they're moving into this love phase of the band, and they're kind of leaving that gap for a British band who've got a lot to say politically, and are happy still to mock some of these characters which are definitely part of society in this country. So yeah, I mean, happy for them to be kind of crowned the new kind of political angry act in the UK right now. But yeah, after that fantastic album from 2 years ago, I think, yeah, they're going into the same subjects. They're not moving away from those subjects. So as you say, toxic masculinity, the poverty in the country, and their experience of England, which is not how it's perceived or shown in some of the mainstream media outlets, and just what they've had to go through to get to where they are as independent artists, which is fantastic. And I mentioned, I think before on the chat, that I just absolutely love that line about they have been robbed once for the Mercury. And honestly, like that year with the Mercury, I had them in as a, like, if it was down to me, like I'm sure same for you, Karl. You know, I would have definitely had them in there. But you know, they did get recognition. They did have the Mobo alternative act as a real breakthrough moment. But yeah, whilst you got that gritty kind of social commentary throughout, yeah, it is kind of witty as well. There are moments of humour, some of which you referred to, and also some real positive messages. And I was loving, I sent before we went on to this, an article in Kerrang I read about the album, and particularly the anecdote about Dream Big, where he got his daughter and some other family children to sing along for that bit, and he just said it was one of his most fun recording moments, getting them in a room to sing that and getting that, he says, you know, forever etched onto vinyl, which is very cool. So yeah, I'm in the same boat, I think, where I think this is another great addition to their growing discography. The third album now. I'm intrigued to sort of see where they go next. Is it still sort of similar subjects and a widening of the genres, and certainly there is some of that already on this record again, which you've referred to. There's even quite a grimy moment in one of the songs, and yeah, Makes Me Violent, I think, is another one I don't think you mentioned just there, but that's one which I thought was one of the highlights here, as well as Get Yourself a Gun, which is just so new metal in its in its like outfit there, and essentially talking about solace in drugs. So yeah, like I say, they don't shy away from their experience, but yeah, there's a positive slant, and I really don't think you can argue with that. Band really going places, and hopefully get a bit more recognition, perhaps from the Mercuries this time. So, Kiley, the view from across the pond here. Were you familiar with Bob Vylan before?
Yeah, I had also listened to their previous album, and
yeah,
really liked it. It didn't make my year end, you know, but I was really excited that this one won the readers poll as well. And I think just to continue what you'd brought up, I'm glad, Andrew, that you brought up idols, because there's so many times when I was listening to Humble as the Sun, where I think the topics that they're approaching are just so much more interesting than what Joe Talbot's coming out with. I mean, you know, we all know I wasn't much of a fan of that. I've tried the last 3 albums and just not doing anything for me, idols these days. So it's awesome to have you know, these socially conscious lyrics with some nice heft behind them. And I think where, you know, I think where this record really excels in those lyrical themes is that, yes, it's you know, a look at the problems in the UK right now, but I think it's really universal with what's going on in the Western Hemisphere right now. And you know, the cousins on the other side of the pond, I listen to these lyrics and they're just as vital as everything going on here between, you know, the right-wing bozos and poverty. And, you know, I also really enjoy, you know, in Humble as the Sun, talking about Island Records and stuff, and just tearing the major labels apart, which, you know, I always enjoy. And it's like, you know, what he's saying there is completely opposite of what I'm always trying to do with the record label, and you know, not tear down and take money, but instead elevate. And so I just, this record for me too is one of my favorites of the year so far. And I don't know, right now, if they stay in this lane, I think it's justified, because the problems are still there. You know, we still don't have many solutions to what they're talking about. So just at its core, a very human record. What it is to live in 2024 and, find out where we go next. But right now, we're in it. So just great record.
Yes. So I think that's all three of us very, very impressed by Humble as the Sun, and we'll see where it lands a little later. Moving on to our second album. And this was selected by Phil Taylor. No, not the darts player, but the writer of Music Observed, who also features on our roundtable on the 5 to 9 blog. Check out his writing, some really great stuff on his blog. So we offered up a choice for him, and he's chosen Mae Krell's I Think I Might Be Grown. And Kiley, I'm going to ask you to lead the discussion here.
Yeah. So, the three of us are always talking about how, we love to have debut records on the pod. And Mae Krell is a new to me, definitely artist. And so, I went into this with a lot of excitement, and just briefly, I've listened to this album, I think 5 times, trying to come away with something that sticks for me. And it's continually over and over. I turn it on and it fades into the background, and, and then I've got the infinite play going on Apple Music, and it's something else that comes after it that I'm always like, oh yeah, I'd rather listen to this. I cannot get into this record. It's just there's I think it's a great thing that there is a embarrassment of riches for female artists right now writing these folk songs. I'm happy about that, but when there's an overabundance, this to me just kind of fades into the pile, and not many notes on it. So that I had sent to you guys earlier. It came out in March, but I got into it in April. But I guess I would say a similar album that I listened to way more this month and really enjoyed is Vylan, Heavy for a While, who Allie Vylan, she grew up in Albuquerque and now lives in Seattle. And, I found out about her because she's playing at the hotel this Saturday. And after listening to that record, I'm just really excited about it. And so I think it's a combination of Mae Krell just not grabbing my ears and having that Vylan record, come across my desk at the same time that I just absolutely adore. It's fantastic. And so very, very brief notes on this one. And I guess, for a sophomore album, I would just hope for a little more variance, the instrumentation, the lyrics, and not have it so every song kind of just runs together and I don't remember any of it.
Do you remember any of it, Karl?
Yeah, so similar to Kiley, I hadn't heard of Mae Krell before going into this one, and those initial plays, I definitely had similar thoughts as well. I'd say I went on quite a journey with this one. Like I said, like the first, we all kind of had the same reaction when we were kind of discussing it in the chat. Pleasant, but nothing really standing out. I think I used the term unremarkable as well after the first play. And, it's one that I've kind of gone back to. And I think several plays later, I was kind of thinking, maybe I was being slightly harsh. I agree with what Kiley's saying in terms of it's still not quite grabbing me as much as I want it to, but I think definitely after a couple of plays, excuse the pun, I think I might have grown to quite enjoy it to a certain degree, I would say. So, you know, it's an album that I quite happily have on like while I'm working. There's nothing, you know, offensive that has me reaching for the skip button. And, you know, while I said, yeah, I don't think it's going to win any awards for, you know, best debut that we're going to hear this year. I will say that I think it does show, you know, Mae's potential, which is what, you know, a debut should do. You know, the more I played it, I think there was actually ended up being quite a few songs on here I really like. And I think that show that potential. I think that middle section was kind of the sweet spot for me. You know, Body Bag was definitely a highlight for now, around that kind of middle run as well, Too Hard. I think that kind of middle bit is, you know, a really solid run of tracks, you know, quite understated, really sweet vocals. You know, you've got these gentle kind of sweep of strings coming in and out. And yeah, like I say, I think Body Bag was kind of my pick for that run. But the one track that I really find myself coming back to is in the back half. It's called is it This Place? That was the one moment for me where I think Mae really does like present herself. You know, just a really gorgeous song. Probably her most like passionate vocal performance on the record. There's some great like piano running in the background that kind of whisks it along quite nicely. So yeah, that song, I would say that's the one that I find myself kind of drawn to the most. But then the title track at the end, I think that sets it up quite nicely for whatever she decides to do next with the next project. It's a real like nice way to end the record, and I think again that's one of the stronger tracks on here as well. So yeah, similar to Kiley, I think this is a decent debut, but for me, it's definitely like not a mind blowing one. Like I say, it's gotten better with every listen, and it's an album. You know, I'm quite happy to play front to back. You know, like I say, on occasion, I think it is so understated. It does fade into the background a bit, but when it does catch me, you know, with my full attention, I do see its charm like coming through more each time. And, you know, like Kylie said, you know, one of the issues is it's arrived at the same time as we've had albums from, you know, Adrian Lenker, as Waxahachie, as Maggie Rogers. One that we're going to talk about as well in a moment that I think you could kind of put into that style as well. You know, all albums that I've really loved in recent weeks. And yeah, I just don't think it quite hits the highs that those records hit. But then they're all, you know, artists on there, you know, several albums in at this point. So yeah, for me, an enjoyable listen, decent debut. But yeah, maybe not a record that's necessarily going to set things alight, I would say.
I'm going to continue the thread we've burrowed here. So yeah, fully agree. It's a very crowded field when you have a female singer-songwriter, mainly acoustic guitar-led, slow songs. It takes something really to stand out that crowd, and yeah, it doesn't. You know, and obviously the caveat is it's a debut, so I think there's glimmers of something which point to you know, interesting future directions here. And there were some songs I thought were pretty good. Like the intro was a nice introduction into it with a bit of piano, the guitar, I think Too Hard had a bit of a cinematic quality to it. And like Karl, I enjoyed Grown as the last song on the album, which you know, again, didn't really change up too much from what you hear for the rest of it. And I think that is really, you know, the thrust of what we're seeing as a downside to this album, essentially, that it just finds that kind of middle lane and sticks to it. And yeah, I think, you know, I I enjoyed her vocals. I think she's got a lovely voice, and I think clearly there is something there. Taking on a more varied route would be would be interesting to see with the music. The lyrics as well, I thought were very thoughtfully written, as hard as they are. And as you say, another album this month, listening to them side by side is certainly puts you in a certain headspace, which it's usually the winter months you might sort of get an autumnal kind of load of albums on in that way. So I see your point there, but with this one it is not really standing out. So more growth to carry on that analogy there from Karl, I think required. And that's where I'll wrap it up. You can hear perhaps, but daughter's not that impressed either. So or maybe you can't hear, but she's crying in the other room. So right, 2 albums in, 3rd album on, and is the one which we've actually referred to just now. And that is Owen, so Mike Kinsella, and his 11th album, Falls of Sioux. So, Kiley's pick. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think as we discussed with Li's ranking so high last year, that it's a required follow-up to listen to Owen, who, I've gone into this many times, but Mike Kinsella is one of my all-time favorite musicians, whether it's American football or Captain Jazz or there. But, in the end, it's always, coming home when there's an Owen album. And it's hard to believe that this is the 11th Owen record, plus a few fantastic EPs along the way. And you always, I always wonder, like, this many albums in, can Mike Kinsella sustain the same themes over and over? There's always a lot of self-hatred and family talk and alcohol abuse and that kind of thing. And it's just this album, once again, it's just fantastic. I think it's a great follow-up to the Avalanche, which I think I don't have an Owen album that I think is weak, but I think the Avalanche was, a very nice place for Mike Kinsella to be with his solo career. And so having the Falls of Sioux here and still working with S. Carey and Zach Hansen, who, I think most people know their work with Bon Iver. They've added this perfect amount of lush richness to the music. Sometimes with Bon Iver, he's gone into some places that it's not my thing, but this is a good partnership with Mike Kinsella. And even though the lyrical themes are the same, I think musically we're still getting fresh territory. I think especially A Reckoning is a fantastic opening track with kind of a Western feel to it. Boku, great first single, had it on the podcast playlist when it was released, and it fits the vibe of the rest of the record. I think Hit and Run 2 is another great single, even if it is heavy, and it essentially boils down to you can't run from your genetics. But that, and then I love the back half of this record as well. I think it's Mount Cleverest that really surprised me, with almost a Led Zeppelin 3 feel to it. Just the big drums and open tunings, and I was driving around the other day listening to this record for the nth time and just had like this this stupid mental image of Robert Plant trying to sing some Owen lyrics. The music is there, but I don't know if Robert Plant would be the right person to deliver the message. That, and then the final track, With You Without You, I think kind of saving the best for last. I think it's Penny is the one track that it, for me, kind of hasn't picked up steam at this point. But 11 records plus all the other projects, Mike Kinsella is a machine, and I am always happy to go to therapy with him whenever he's got a new record out.
And I know Karl is as well. So you can continue in that vein next.
Yeah, so probably the least surprising news ever. I absolutely adore this album. It's very quickly become Death Taxes, Mike Kinsella making one of my favorite records of the year. So as I said in like my review for 5 to 9, and you've just said it as well, he's never made a bad record. But I think this, recent Purple Patch is the best music he's made his whole career. From American Football 3 to The Avalanche to obviously Lies last year and now to this. Each record, very much carrying, as you say, Kiley, his stamp, his DNA. But each one of those projects just completely different sounds, moods, feelings. And, he kind of mentioned it in his press material for this one as well. Like, if The Avalanche was like his winter, then the Falls of Sioux is his spring. So, lyrically, it's like he's come to terms more with his divorce, where there was only like devastation to be found on The Avalanche. On this one, there's, these droplets of like wit and humor, which sort of carries like this air of acceptance, this has happened for these reasons, and it's probably for the best. It's kind of got that air to it throughout. It's not worked out for me. I'm tired of being sad. I'm going to try to be a bit more positive, but still, there is that, as you say, kind of a bit of self-loathing, and he's still got that in there as well. So, that's lyrically the mood that I think we find him in here. But the sonics, there is, for me, as moving, as exquisitely arranged as anything he's pulled together before. I kind of touched on in my review as well. Like, I was curious to see how like the experimentation from Lies would carry onto this record. And, while he's not throwing kazoos in there or going off on these electronic tangents, you could definitely hear, like the boundaries have kind of been pushed further back. So, and I think the case in point with that is the opening track, A Reckoning. I remember listening to that for the first time, immediately messaged you guys about it. And it was like, I had to pause the album at that moment because I was so taken with it on that first play. Those big, like, tubular bells, that, like, southern guitar twang, that opening line about traveling with more dirty laundry in his case that he's had since he was 21. It was just like, holy shit.
Still smells like the thrift store where he rescued it from.
It was just a holy shit moment. I was like, incredible. And I think, to be honest, that first play, like, nothing competed with that track and then Bo Coop as well, which I'd enjoyed. But I think at that point, I probably didn't. No, I mean, those two I'd say were my highlights, but I think the rest of it, I think I even said to you guys, it's maybe one of his weakest ones at this point. But yeah, the more I came back to it, the more I loved about it. The poetry and the strings on Virtue Misspent, brilliant track. You mentioned Mount Cleverest and Led Zeppelin. I saw like shades of Radiohead particularly like in Rainbow's era, Radiohead.
Sure.
On that one. But yeah, now you've said Led Zeppelin, I can definitely hear that as well. Penny wasn't the one. I think that was one that I read. I'm not sure if you shared it actually, Andrew. Like the interview with Mike, and it was him saying that it's like one of his like closet or sleeper hit songs. You know, it's just really simple for the most part, but then like that arrangement that comes in at the end, you know, it's just utterly gorgeous right at the end. And then, like you say, With You, Without You has, I think, like deliberate notes of the Edge in the guitars coming through. I mean, he's definitely done that on purpose. It's like Mike Kinsella does U2. Just like a really stunning finale. You know, the horns coming in there, and it just has like this quiet epicness about it, which I just love. So yeah, I mean, I won't gush over it anymore. I think we've done that between us. So I'll just finish by saying, you know, I said to you guys, for me, this was like a similar record to Grian's from last year. Obviously not stylistically, but in terms of, you know, a one-of-a-kind songwriter, keeping it relatively simple, but at the same time, just doing it better than anybody else right now. I think, you know, 9 songs, not a moment wasted. And, you know, yeah, it's another record like that one that's like near flawless for me.
And then coming on to less of a believer, as it were. I feel like you got like the believers that it's onto the agnostic guy here. Yeah, I mean, we've referred to Lies from last year, and that took a while for me to get into more by the end of the year. But it wasn't an album which I loved. I felt there were really great moments on there, and that was my introduction to the world of the Kinsellas. This is a chance to hear what Kylie you were pleading about. You know, try Owen. don't give up now. That's it. So here we go. We're back a year later, a year and a little bit. And yeah, it's better. Like for me, definitely.
All right.
Praise be.
I'd say on that front, I'm probably edging closer. You know, maybe on each project, it's gonna sort of curve up, and maybe then at some point I will get to your levels of fandom with the Consellas. But yeah, like, you know, I think you mentioned that some of the highlights for me are Reckoning. I was put in mind of Metallica's The Unforgiven, with the bells and the real, you know, orchestra type guitar at the beginning, so dramatic. It just sort of draws you in, and you think, okay, yeah, good start. I'll take that. And then Baku, as you say, Kylie, you picked that for the March playlist, and I thought, yeah, it's an okay song. And then actually on listening to it a few times here, this is fantastic. I just love the guitars here, and you know, Karl, you said exquisite as one of your adjectives for the album. You know, I think lush. It's got all those sort of elements to it. It's really diving into this, very kind of deliberately arranged output here, which with Baku, I know they're disgraced now, but it reminded me of Red House Painters, which based on my previous listening was a positive. Cursed Id, I thought it was ID, but Id was showing up in the Brooklyn Vegan article when he was going through all the tracks. That was one which, you know. Did
you not take any philosophy classes?
I know what the Id is. Yeah, but it's just one of those things you sort of see it, and instantly my brain goes Cursed ID. Okay, yeah, I get that. Get that. And then it was only reading that. So the article where I realised it wasn't ID. But in terms of the lyrics and the theme here, you know, it's kind of, you know, he hasn't always been the best of people. He's kind of looking back, but he wouldn't change a thing. And I just thought that was a really nice kind of let it be moment, I suppose. I mean, one of the key things I would pull out from the Lies record is that the lyrics are just very interesting and very readable, very listenable in that sense. And this continues. So I can see definitely that element of Mike Kinsella's music being a draw. And I mean, the absolute highlight is Mount Cleverest, just to add to the chorus of voices on that one. But it's so different from anything else on this album as well. And it just stands as a peak, I suppose, to dive into, Mount talk. But yeah, it's even with the lyric, "I'll only come on command." I mean, it's quite something, this song, and just how it's all put together. You say Led Zeppelin, you say Radiohead, Karl, so yeah, there's lots of influences which have meshed together just to bring something so lovely, even with such lyrics. And after that peak is just where I get lost a little bit with this, and I would say is With You, Without You, I didn't like as much as you guys really. Again, I enjoyed the theme of it. I enjoyed the lyrics, but it wasn't as enjoyable as other songs on the album. Qui je plaisante. Yeah, just drifted a little bit for me, and maybe because that's the one which comes immediately after Mount Cleverest, it's really difficult to maintain those levels. But that for me, if I'm going to give much of a draw, and overall, I'm saying that this is a very good album, which I've really enjoyed, and like I say, I'm not gonna say that I'm preaching the Mike Kinsella gospel just yet, but I'm certainly getting there, and this is an album which is going to be a bridge if I'm ever going to get to that level of fandom and appreciation. But yeah, Hit and Run is a really great song off here as well, as you've referred to. So yeah, overall, yeah, very impressive, and finally, I see a little bit more of what the fuss is about, and your devotion to what was it in the article, Karl? It was the godfather of emo. Is that the
of Midwest emo? Yeah,
of Midwest emo. Yeah. There we go. I'm starting to see it.
You could at least describe yourself as Mike Kinsella curious.
Yeah. Very apt. Yeah, the goodbye curious, which he refers to. Yeah, we'll stick to the humorous version of that one. But yeah. So Mike Kinsella curious. Lovely way to end our review, and yeah, really positive from us all there. So, fourth album, and that is All Born Screaming by St. Vincent. So, Karl, very pleased you chose this one, and you're to kick us off.
Yeah, so I mean, I was quite late to the party when it comes to Annie Clark. Completely missed, the first three records. Well, first three solo records, I should say. So Marry Me, Actor, and Strange Mercy kind of passed me by at the time that they came out. I saw her perform, is it Digital Witness on Jules Holland, kind of like around the time of her self-titled record. And that was like one of those revelation moments. I was basically won over from there. Fantastic performance. And yeah, got into that, self-titled record off the back of that. Loved it. Then, Mass Seduction came out a few years later. And yeah, loved that even more. Ended up just outside my top 10 in 2017. And then her last album, Daddy's Home, as well, I enjoyed, albeit not as much as those two. But, yeah, just an incredible artist. And I think her influence as well on, like, some of the newer artists we've got coming through this current crop, it can be a bit understated. But I watched a clip of the last dinner party at the Brit Awards getting their award, and I think St. Vincent actually presented them with it, but they were talking about how much she has influenced them. And after watching that clip, you can really hear it coming through. And then I found out that Emily Roberts actually uses like her signature guitar as well. So yeah, just really I think she's a bit of an unsung hero. Probably deserves more plaudits than the abundance that she gets, I think. But like you say, this was quite an easy pick for me. Loved her previous stuff, and then the strength of those first two singles, Broken Man, with those, thunderous, got all the swagger of a decent Queens of the Stone Age track about it. I think, the day that dropped, we were kind of all raving about it in the chat. Just a fantastic single. And then Flea, I think, was the other one as well. Just buzzes and bounces, and then it erupts in like this colossal final 30 seconds right at the end. So yeah, with it being a fairly short album and like those two singles, I was fairly confident this was going to be one to deliver for us this month. And yeah, I'm pleased to say it really does. Outside of those two really great singles, I think that entire first half is just sensational. Hell Is Near, just this really sumptuous yet quite ominous like opener. Again, also reminded me a bit of Radiohead, the way it kind of meanders along. Annie's got like this whispery vocal that kind of glides within this soft, floaty melody. Just a really fantastic start. And then Reckless that comes after, excellent as well. Completely different, really operatic, just steadily builds, and then, just explodes into this like seismic pulse of like guitars and synths just like throwing themselves at your ears. Just really fantastic. Then obviously like the two singles. But yeah, Big Time Nothing is probably my favourite on the whole record here. It's like if you put, I want to say, Muse, Jack White, Nile Rodgers, Stevie Wonder, Peter Gabriel, if you put all of them into a blender, like this is the song that would come out. It's like really funky, yet also like quite industrial. And it's like this song that feels like it shouldn't work, but it really does. And yeah, I just absolutely love it. And then, like, as if it can't get better from there, she then follows it up with Violent Times, which is like this long lost Bond theme, really widescreen, really like cinematic, all these strings going on. It's just, yeah, that first half, I'm absolutely in love with it. And for me, like, that's the pinnacle of the record. I think the last few tracks are still great. Sweetest Fruit and So Many Planets, both of them, they've still got like the excellent guitar work that you'd expect from Annie. But for me, those last few maybe don't quite hit the heights of anything in that first half. I actually think the last track for me is the weakest one on here. I think, it's nearly 7 minutes, and, for an album that's so dramatic in places, it feels almost like a slightly inconclusive ending. It sort of takes that time to, spends a long time building, but then you're waiting for that big finale and it never quite comes. So I think, yeah, that's probably the weakest one for me. But yeah, very minor criticism, I'll say. This is like another stellar project from Annie. Absolute roller coaster ride through her, her imagination, her creativity that she takes you across on this record. It's just outstanding. And, I enjoy Daddy's Home, but this is a real step up. I'd actually put this up there with, of what I've heard, this is up there with the best work. I think, obviously, it was the last one to drop, so maybe a slight disadvantage compared to some of the others, but I think the more I spend time with this record, the more I'm just going to love it. And yeah, it'll be right up there at the end of the year again. So big thumbs up for me.
Yeah, not a big nothing, but big something you're giving this. So, Kiley, what did you make of All Born Screaming?
Yeah, I think it's been since the beginning. Annie Clark's St. Vincent been one of my absolute favorites. I lucked out in 2007 seeing the National on the Boxer tour. And they had St. Vincent. She just released her debut album, and she opened it, and it was at the Ogden Theater in Denver, which is, I'd say, probably like 1,500 people, very small venue for what both of these artists have turned into. And I've been trying to remember. I feel like she was solo too, but not your typical acoustic songwriter thing. She had all kinds of loops and beats going, and obviously, I think needs to already be up there in the discussions for one of the best guitarists of all time. Just phenomenal lick writer. So yeah, I've been following her since the beginning, and I think there's two reasons that this album is fantastic. The first is the elephant in the room. We've ditched Jack Antonoff on the production, so he's gone from Mass Seduction and Daddy's Home. And I'm so glad that Annie Clark just self-produced this record. I believe she worked with Justin Meldal-Johnson. We'll talk about him in a second. But the second part of that is that these 10 tracks are, to me, essentially a greatest hits of everything that she's done, but it's new music. It ties in together every era that she's had, including Love This Giant that she did with David Byrne, which is, just a phenomenal record too. As much as I love the beginning of this record, for me, Sweetest Fruit, which really reminds me of that project with David Byrne, is my highlight, and So Many Planets. Just that back to back. But I mean, this is just firing on all cylinders. I love Reckless so much. Hell Is Near is like, I really like that song. But as far as openers, as many times as I've listened to this record, that's like the one song that I enjoy it, but I'm like, damn, this just doesn't do it for me as an opener. But like Reckless, when that gets in there, it reminds me of Nine Inch Nails, at their early to mid 90s peak, which shouldn't be a surprise because I just mentioned Justin Meldal-Johnson, who has played with Nine Inch Nails, and I think one of the most underrated musicians in pop music right now. I mean, the guy played with Beck from Odelay through Morning Phase, and that's one of the best discography runs of all time, and you can't tell me otherwise. So between that and then everyone talks about Dave Grohl being on this record, and he does a fantastic job. And I read a little bit of Annie Clark talking about working with him and the way that he came in and kind of changed up drum parts on the fly and really made the two songs that he play on work. But then also, I mean, Josh Freese, another Nine Inch Nails alumni who's currently, Foo Fighters drummer, one of the best drummers of all time. I mean, she's got both of these guys on here, and it shows. Just, I'm with you through this entire thing. Just blows my mind up until the title track, and that one, just for what it is, doesn't seem to go anywhere. And I'm mostly upset that we've got the Kate LeBon feature credit on there, and I love Kate LeBon and just feel like she's kind of underutilized on that song. So that for me, because when the track listing came out, I was like, oh, all right, Kate LeBon's on one of these songs too. And it just, we've talked about other singers getting featuring credits for doing backup vocals and whether that's warranted or not. Kind of reminded me of that situation. But yeah, my gosh, this record is phenomenal and has made it very, I think this month is very difficult to pick the top few albums because, you know, we chose wisely this month. So very happy with it.
Definitely. And I go back to how I introduced this segment, saying that I was very pleased that Karl chose this, because like you two, very, very much enjoyed this album. And it's quite a nice thread after we've spoken about Owen, where I sort of said, yeah, didn't love the first album of Mike Kinsella's, which I heard last year, and then it's picked up. Well, with St. Vincent, I have been usually indifferent. Not that I've dived in as much as I probably definitely will do now after this record. But yeah, just to sum that up, I mean, she actually headlined End of the Road Festival, so the obligatory reference of that festival for the pod. The first time I went and didn't really know anything about her, and I just remember I was there and I just thought, it's not really doing loads for me, and I just went and got some food, which yeah, I think sums up my
we all have those
appetite
regrets
for new music at the time. And yet, you know, she's playing Royal Albert Hall this year. I would love to go to that. Who knows whether that will come off, but so yeah, just not been someone who I've been drawn to in the past. I've seen a few videos, and it yeah, kind of strange videos which didn't kind of appeal to me. But then you hear Broken Man, and I was, you know, one of the best songs of the year so far, as is Flea. So you get two singles off the bat, and I loved the industrial sound of it. 9 Inch Nails absolutely seeps through both of these songs. So, you know, what you've, and I wasn't aware of the fact that there is a genuine link to 9 Inch Nails as well, but now it makes even more sense. And yeah, those two consecutively I chose as, you know, best tracks of the month, 2 months running. The third single just before the album came out was Big Time Nothing, and Karl, I mean, you loved that. Kylie, you like it as well from what you were just saying, but this is the one which I haven't enjoyed as much, and it just sounded a bit more like what you'd hear with a big synth on a record. So that was the lead in to the album. You know, 2 tracks I was blown away by, and a third which I was maybe indifferent about, again with St. Vincent. But going into this, you know, there's the 2 before, Broken Man and Flea, and that quartet at the beginning is so tight, so compelling, and just takes you into a very kind of fixed, claustrophobic headspace, in a very like alluring way. Basically, there's creepy atmosphere in the opener, Hell Is Near. You know, lyrically talking about a bit of a distressed state of mind with Reckless, which, you know, I liked your kind of summary, Karl, of it. Say, you know, you got synths, you got guitars all just meshed together at the end to kind of bring it into a bit of a cacophony. And then yeah, Broken Man, which yeah, just again has that real tight like synth, which then breaks out into these massive drums, and Flea again, which is just superb, and very much about that kind of physical desire element. Big Time Nothing then sort of brings to an end that sort of it's a change up musically, and it's kind of like the segue into the second half of the album, which is so different to those that opening quartet, which I love. And I suppose, you know, that there's the potential, it feels, with that opening quartet to have an entirely different album if you remain in that kind of zone. And so it's slightly jarring, but then I like where it goes next with Violent Times. The Power's out as well, and I feel like the second half of the album is where she's kind of taking on the baton from Caroline Polachek's album from last year, where she's exploring a few different genres here. It's very poppy, but incredibly diverse. Again, the lyrical quality is high. and another parallel with Caroline Polachek, which was revealed by our friend Anthony Fantano, is that Sweetest Fruit is a tribute to Sophie. And on Caroline Polachek's album last year, that was the Euro pop banger, I believe, which was in tribute to Sophie as well. So I mean, as a side comment, it feels like that's an artist I need to check out because of how highly
Sure.
she was held in esteem by these unbelievable artists who are still making records today. So many planets. I also loved the dreaminess of that, with that kind of reggae tune in there. And yeah, similarly, the All Born Screaming is a slight drop off. I did enjoy it, but for 7 minutes, it usually when it's a long song, you've got so many different layers which justify it, and it's kind of feels like it meets that halfway point. And all I can say about where I land with that is that it's like a reprise. Like at the end, you've had this amazing journey, and then it's like almost this kind of the curtains come down at the end, and they all come on, and it's kind of the All Born Screaming concept, which they're kind of giving a bit of a push to. So I can see that working in the live setting more perhaps than on the record. But yeah, just phenomenal, and someone I need to reappraise because this is right up there for me. And yes, will be like many albums this month, be featuring very highly come the end of the year. So we move on to our final record, and that's my choice. So this was Vampire Weekend with Only God Above Us, and yeah, a band who I think we all have our own history with in our different ways. Karl never really got into them based on discussions. Kiley, you've loved their stuff in the past and then feel there's been a drop off, particularly since one of the band members left.
Spoilers.
Sorry. Yeah, I myself loved their opening record back in the university days, 2008, when there was all sorts, the first MGMT band we referenced last month. Then the second album I thought was all right. Somehow missed the third album, which in retrospect was probably the high point. And then that one they came back with in 2019 just was a way over long, bloated effort, which had its moments, but was nowhere near the levels of what they'd produced previously. So yeah, you go into it with a lot of intrigue, I think, with this band. They seem to be the critics' darlings, that's for sure. Looking at how people have assessed this, and for me, after the kind of detour with Father of the Bride, their previous album 2019, they're kind of back on song here. It took me a while to fully get to where I did with it, but it's tight. It's not overlong. I mean, that's an immediate sort of tick based on Father of the Bride. So again, we've got, I think it's just the 10 songs on this album. So much going on musically, as there always tends to be with Vampire Weekend projects. And I suppose there's a slight difference to maybe the three previous we talked about. Something which is veering on hopeful in terms of what the overall kind of lyrical content is angling at. So yeah, I'm just really pleased to hear that they are back in such a good way. With the singles, I thought they're okay, but actually it's through the album where I've got on more board with them more, and I see their place. I mean, it starts off really well. Ice Cream Piano, I think, is it starts off with this very sad lyric about someone losing faith with whatever it is, and Ezra trying to sort of reel them back in and say, you know, it's not all bad, mate, you know, or whatever it is, which he's trying to you know, convey here. And there's just so much, again, musically going on. It's quintessential Vampire Weekend, and I think that's perhaps why they are so admired, is just how original, albeit with a huge nod to Paul Simon, they are with their music in this day and age. Classical follows straight afterwards. You know, there's a ululation at the beginning. High guitar notes. It just doesn't really sound like much else which comes out now, really. And like I say, they're just hitting their groove. And there was very little I didn't like on this album. I found myself, whilst I was shaking my head at Anthony Fantano's St. Vincent review, with this one I was kind of nodding most of the way, because even to the point of The Surfer being, for me, one of the weakest ones on here, and I know you guys love that one, so we'll have the rebuke shortly. But yeah, it's just so great to hear them back and sounding like they used to be, and have set their stall out from the beginning. And we can kind of look at Father of the Bride as an aberration here. And yeah, piano is absolutely on fire. The double bass is a rare inclusion on a mainstream sort of pop record. Yeah, everything is just done really nicely here, and one I can just easily listen back to again and again, not get too bored with. And yeah, my fan hat for Vampire Weekend, which was stoked most. So if I talked about what I did with St. Vincent at End of the Road, Vampire Weekend's headline set is the best headline set I've seen at that festival, and that followed a couple of years after, when I was probably a bit, yeah, they're okay, maybe feeling a bit more like Karl at that point, but seeing them live really drove it home. And I think, yeah, with this record they've managed to translate that onto their recorded tracks. So yeah, very, very much a big fan of this record, and I feel there might be a bit of variance with this one, but I'll pass over to Kiley now.
Yeah, I was really glad you picked this record as well. I think it was 2008 when the debut self-titled had just come out, and I was lucky enough to see them in Berlin in a basement that was probably 200 people, you know, and just I think, similar to you, Andrew, where I was at that time, finishing up school, and just really, really feeling that, while recognizing that it was, you know, essentially a Graceland ripoff a lot of the time, but, you know, they made it their own. And Contra and Modern Vampires, I thought both just fantastic records that those years they came out, listened to them nonstop. And then Father of the Bride, it's just, it's overlong, it's bloated, and I didn't really identify that anything stood out for me on that. It's super disappointed with that one. So, you know, it was a good opportunity here to have some recovery. And unfortunately for me, you know, I said in the chat before it came out, I didn't know if I had just maybe outgrown Vampire Weekend. And I definitely have, because this album, to me, the singles are really weak. Didn't pull me in. And there's just the one song you don't like, The Surfer, for me is like the one song that rescues this album, and is the one song that's made my, you know, big 2024 list. And I didn't realize this till this morning when I was looking at the credits, but, you know, you'd mentioned Rostam leaving after Modern Vampires, who I thought was really the essential member of this band that made them Vampire Weekend, has a writing credit on that song, and also has a production credit. I don't know if it's just that song or not. So it's nice to see him involved a little bit. And, for me, it's unfortunate that, they can't get back. Never say never. We've seen all the reunions. We're old enough to know that you never say never, but, Rostam's solo material doesn't really do anything for me either. But as that foursome, I think that's when they really click. And I don't know. Ezra Koenig's voice to me right now is just nails on a chalkboard. And, same thing with, I think Chris Thompson's the drummer. There's just a lot of, old snare shuffles and stuff that were on the first two albums that he's kind of bringing back here. And it's just, it comes off as old and stale. And as many times as I tried with this record, it is a damn slog for me. So 2 in a row, I'm comfortably out on the Vampire Weekend bandwagon. And kind of, I think the funniest thing to come out of this is that I enjoyed the most was their, I can't remember where they were recording at, but the Peggy-O cover, which, is traditional, but Ezra is, a very well documented deadhead, as am I. And so kind of, I enjoyed that cover of what I would say is a quintessential Grateful Dead song more than anything on this record. Just more disappointment, which I'm disappointed about.
So there we go. Faith restored for me. Kiley's disappointed. It's not reeled you back. And Karl, who has always been on the fence about Vampire Weekend, has this reeled you in, or are we more on the against pile for Vampire Weekend here?
Yeah, it was funny there. Kiley sort of saying that, the Vampire Weekend has ended. I was like thinking he's now entered the weekday, which is
every album is a Monday.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I've been with Vampire Weekend. I would say is always the weekday, never the weekend. It's just one of those bands that I've just never really taken to. For want of trying, as you say, Andrew, that they're the critical darlings, and every time I go into a record, I'm expecting something to get me, and it just never comes. For me, they're more of a singles band. A-Punk, one of the songs that soundtracked my uni days. We'd always request it on a night out. Fantastic single. Some of the ones off Contra I really quite enjoyed too. So single-wise, they've had their moments for me. And then it's funny you should mention them live. I actually saw them at Mad Cool in 2019, as it was one of those where I was like, there's no one else on. Let's go hear the songs that we like. And I actually really enjoyed their set, like more than I was expecting to. It was kind of like one of the pleasant surprises of the weekend for me, that. So yeah, I mean, I'd probably go see them live again in a heartbeat. But yeah, when it comes to their, when I've been exposed to them for a full album, that's when I kind of get turned off, I think. When I saw the reviews for this one, I thought, okay, everyone's saying it's return to form. Is this the record that's finally going to win me over? But yeah, alas, it's the same story this time around. It was like, similar to Kiley with Everything last month, I think. I played this album a lot. I sent it to you guys. It ended up one of my top 5 most played albums for April on my Apple Replay. So, I've spent time trying to see, the thing that a lot of other people see with this record. And ultimately, it's just, I'm not enjoying it for the full duration. For me, this is like a really 50-50 record. So I might even like it slightly more than you, Kiley. I don't know. But it was like, there's moments on here I really do like. Classical, I think, is fantastic. We touched on The Surfer. That's one of my favourites. It has a great mood to it. I said to you guys, like, the guitar work reminded me a lot of Sundara Karma, which for me is obviously never a bad thing. Prep School Gangsters, got some, nice cinematic moments, interesting arrangements sort of going on there that I find myself, vibing with. And then, Gen X Cops was like you, Andrew. I didn't really rate it as a single, but on the record here, I think it's actually one of the better tracks. The buzzy riff that it's got running all the way through. I think the chorus is really catchy. And then the other one that I'm sort of more on the like side than dislike, I'd say, is Hope at the end. We spoke about the St. Vincent track probably not needing to be 7 minutes. I don't think this necessarily needed to be quite as long as 8 minutes either. But I think, it's quite a memorable, has its moments, and I think it works as a closing track. So those are like the 5 songs that I quite dig, but then it's the other 5 tracks for me I just can't get on board with at all. The first half in particular, I have to get through that every time I play this record. Aside from classical, it really just turns me off as soon as I kind of hit play. Ice Cream Piano and Connect. You mentioned, Andrew, like, there's so much going on in those songs. For me, there's too much going on in those songs. They're a bit all over the place. It sounds like a million ideas happening at once that I don't. For me, it doesn't really come together, I don't think. Capricorn, it's a similar story. It starts really plodding, and then it kind of erupts in the back half into this. Well, it's not the back half. It's like midway through. There's this awful cacophony of a noise that I find so grating. And honestly, every time it hits that point, I genuinely wince a bit. It's like, it's like nails on chalkboard. That song for me. And then there's the 2 that I'm kind of indifferent towards, but they don't really grip me. Prada has a similar moment to Capricorn, but it's maybe not quite as offensive. Mary Boone is one that I can sort of appreciate. Why you would enjoy that song, but for me, it just doesn't do anything. I think that's the big thing with their music is I love songs that they move me in one way or another, and I think a lot of the time when I listen to Vampire Weekend, they just leave me feeling a bit numb, I would say. So yeah, I'd say this was a real mixed bag for me. I would say I've simultaneously enjoyed it more than any Vampire Weekend record previously, while also probably disliking it as much as I have all their previous stuff. So yeah, probably me and Kiley may be the only 2 people that won't have it on our year-end list come December, but yeah, that's where I've landed with it.
There we go, 2 on defeat for Vampire Weekend, and 2 uses of nails on a chalkboard. So Ezra's voice and that moment in Capricorn, which I will have to find and listen back and pick that out.
You won't miss it.
I must have. So there we go. That is the 5 albums discussed. But of course, we do like to rank them, don't we? So we now come to the verdict. And who would like to go first? Yeah, it's got to jump in.
Sure, I'll go first.
I've got the scoreboard. Kiley, yeah?
5, Mae Krell. 4, Vampire Weekend. The rest, triple tie for first place. No, if that's what I want to do. But I hate this. I'm going to go with 3 Owen, 2 St. Vincent, and 1 Bob Vylan.
1 Bob Vylan. Okay. 5, 4 for St. Vincent. Okay. Karl.
Yeah, so probably slightly different to you guys. I've got Vampire Weekend in 5. Because for me, I'm 50-50 on that one. Mae Krell, I'll listen to that front to back. So Vampire Weekend 5, Mae Krell 4. And then, yeah, this is where it gets tough, but I've got St. Vincent in 3. And then one that I so wish I could give another 5 points to because it's so different to the other one, but I love it just as much. Number 2, I've got Bob Vylan, and probably no surprise, I've got Owen at number 1. So
That's not surprised. Okay, right. So and then I'm 5th, Mae Krell. 4th, and like I say, I very much enjoyed it. So Mae Krell was the one which I didn't enjoy as much, but all 4 others were great. But 4th for me is Owen. 3rd, I have Bob Vylan. 2nd, Vampire Weekend. So not 1st, so don't worry. And 1st, St. Vincent. So 1, 2, 3. Oh,
That's about as varied as
so.
we get.
As varied as we get, and gives us a tie. But it's not hard to tell who is going to be the winner because both of you gave higher, I think. So it's between St. Vincent and Bob Vylan. St. Vincent was my top one, but I think you both had Bob Vylan above St. Vincent, right?
I had it as 1.
Yeah.
You had it as 2.
No, Kylie had it as 2, didn't you?
No, I had it as 1.
No, St. Vincent,
Yeah.
you had as 2.
Oh, yeah, St. Vincent is 2, yes.
So, yeah, Bob Vylan and St. Vincent are exactly the same. Surely.
12 points each, yeah. But then we obviously, so Karl, remind me of your rankings.
They've both got a 5, a 4, and a 3. That's right.
Yeah, but 2 of us would have voted higher. So my higher one was St. Vincent. Kylie's was Bob Vylan.
But then
Kylie
was higher. He was Bob Vylan, and then I don't know.
I'll make number 1 St. Vincent to settle this.
No. I reckon this should be the first joint. I think this should be the first joint.
No. There's no joint. No. It's what was your top 2, Karl? So Owen was 1st and 2nd was Bob Vylan, right?
Yeah, Bob Vylan was 2nd, yeah.
Yeah, so Bob Vylan wins basically because you 2 had Bob Vylan higher than St. Vincent.
Right, okay. I'm with you.
So after a technicality, and
well, they're both winners. They're both winners.
Yeah.
In our books, they're both winners, but the actual winner for April is Bob Vylan for Humble as the Sun. So our April album of the month. Huge congratulations to the villains, to the 2 Bobbies. Yeah, fantastic album and just overall fantastic month. And as you can tell, incredibly difficult to separate the top ones here. So next month, we will be discussing I'm Totally Fine With It, Don't Give a Fuck Anymore by Arab Strap, Frog in Boiling Water by Dive, Better Will Come by Flamingosis, Pull the Rope by Ibibio Sound Machine, and A Dream Is All We Know by the Lemon Twigs. Also look out for our poll where we ask you to vote for the 5th album we'll be reviewing in June. And as ever, you can stay up to date with what we're up to by following 5 to 9 on Twitter and Instagram, New Music Central via @NewMusicKarl on Twitter, Mama Mañana Records via @Mama Mañana Records on Instagram, and Blinded by the Floodlights via @BFloodlights on Twitter. Thanks for listening.